The room went quiet the way space goes quiet, completely and all at once. Commander Valia of the Zelayan 13th crossed the grand concourse in 12 measured strides, the crowd parting before her like a physical thing. She stopped close enough that Elias could see the secondary pupils in her silver eyes contract. Her voice, when it came, carried to every corner of the hall. "Captain, repeat what you said." 3 hours earlier, the Grand Concourse had smelled like bad coffee and worse politics. Maya Lin had handed Elias the briefing dossier at 0630, still in her travel jacket, dark circles under her eyes from the transit jump. The summit had been 2 years in the making. 6 factions, 1 table, 0 margin for error. Elias had spent the morning reviewing seating arrangements and threat assessments, trying to memorize names he couldn't pronounce, and honorifics that shifted based on which moons were currently in retrograde. He was bad at diplomacy. He'd known that when they assigned him. What he was good at was reading a room, and what the room told him, the moment the Zelayan delegation arrived, was that Commander Valia ran a different kind of operation than anything on the human side of the treaty line. Her officers moved with her, not behind her. They watched her hands, not her face. She took her position at the Zelayan table without ceremony, reviewed the briefing documents with the systematic focus of someone who had already made her decisions and was now confirming them. Elias watched from across the hall. He noted the way she stood, weight distributed low, shoulders squared not from posturing but from habit, the stance of someone who fought and expected to keep fighting. Her uniform bore no decoration beyond rank insignia. She wore it like it was armor. He'd turned to Maya, meaning to say something professional, something tactically astute, something that demonstrated he had, in fact, read the cultural sensitivity materials. What came out was, "She looks like she could bench press a gunship, and I cannot figure out if that's terrifying or—" He hadn't finished the sentence. He hadn't needed to. The acoustic design of the Grand Concourse, as it turned out, was exceptional. Every delegate within 60 feet had paused mid-conversation, and the Theran mediator to his left had set down her water glass with extremely deliberate care. Maya had gone the specific color of someone watching a shuttle enter an atmosphere at the wrong angle. Valia, at her table across the room, had gone very still. Elias had stood there, dossier in hand, running a rapid-fire tactical assessment of his options. Apologize immediately, request emergency extraction, or simply cease to exist. None of them had felt adequate. Then Valia had pushed back her chair. She crossed the room in 12 strides. Elias counted them, because counting was the only thing his brain offered him in that particular moment. The crowd drew back. The ambient noise of 600 diplomatic personnel compressed down to nothing. She stopped close enough that he could see the structural silver of her irises, which the secondary pupils that Zelayan combat doctrine texts described as a threat assessment reflex, narrowing when a target was being evaluated, dilating when a threat was confirmed. Hers were narrowing. "Captain," she said, "repeat what you said." His career made a sound in the back of his mind like a hull integrity warning. And then something shifted in him, something that felt less like courage and more like the absence of any remaining options. And Elias Vance looked Commander Valia of the Zelayan 13th Fleet directly in her silver eyes and told her exactly what he'd said. Precisely, without revision. The concourse held its breath. Valia regarded him for 3 full seconds. Since she reached into the inner fold of her uniform jacket and removed a narrow object, a formal insignia braid in Zelayan command colors, and extended her arm into the space between them, wrist turned upward, the braid resting across her palm. "You are either," she said, Extraordinarily honest or extraordinarily stupid. Her secondary pupils dilated. The martial courtship rite requires both. I invoke it, publicly, now. 600 beings did not breathe. Elias looked at the braid across her palm. Narrow, formal, the weight of an entire cultural architecture resting in 4 inches of woven cord. He took it. The sound that moved through the concourse wasn't applause. It was something older than that. The collective exhale of species who recognized a threshold being crossed. Maya, somewhere behind him, made a sound he'd never heard from her before and hoped never to hear again. Velia turned. The crowd organized itself without being asked, a pulling back into a loose circle around the center floor, an arena assembled from instinct and tradition. Elias followed her into it. What came next was not what he'd expected. She didn't test his combat capability. She didn't measure his physical endurance or demand feats of strength. She stood across from him in the circle and asked him, in precise and clinical sequence, how he would respond to a 3-front engagement with compromised supply lines, to what he understood about Slayan command succession law, and whether he believed tactical retreat constituted failure or intelligence. He answered every question the way he'd told her what he'd said, directly, without revision. He got 2 of them wrong by Xalayan doctrine and said so, then explained his reasoning anyway. Her expression didn't shift, but her secondary pupils did. The final question she asked him was not tactical. Why, she said. Why did you not retreat when given the opportunity? The concourse waited. Elias thought about the hull integrity warning sound his career had made. He thought about the cultural sensitivity materials he'd read and promptly failed to apply. He thought about the way she'd crossed the room in 12 strides and stopped close enough that retreating would have required a decision. Because retreating, he said, would have been dishonest. 3 seconds. The same 3 seconds as before. And then Velia turned her arm outward. The same gesture, the same wrist. But the braid was gone now, already accepted. What remained was the offering itself. Her arm, extended. He took it, not the braid this time, her. And that was how Captain Elias Vance escorted Commander Velia of the Selayan 13th Fleet out of the Grand Concourse, through 600 witnesses into whatever came next. What came next was the Astrometrics Gallery. Quiet, star-mapped, the soft projection of 3 contested systems rotating above them in pale blue light. They finalized the compact there, without ceremony, in the language of 2 people who had already established they didn't bother with revision. 6 months later, they ran the Kareth Corridor maneuver from the Nexus Operations Hub. 17 ships, 2 doctrines, 1 command frequency. It worked because she modified her flanking formation on instinct, and he recognized it immediately and held his position, when neither of them had to say a word. High General Radek's hologram materialized at 1400 hours, his expression carrying the particular weight of someone about to make something official that had been functionally true for months. The authorization was brief. The new initiative's mandate was broader than anything either fleet had attempted. Velia listened. Then she looked at Elias. He looked back. In the pale rotation of contested stars above them, he noticed, for the first time, that she no longer adjusted her stance when he entered a room. No weight redistribution, no shoulders squaring. The combat-ready stillness she carried everywhere else simply wasn't present. Not around him. He filed that information in the same place he'd filed the 12 strides, and the 3 seconds, and the weight of a braid across a palm. The stars turned slowly overhead. The Karath systems, the corridor they'd held together. He didn't say anything. Neither did she, But when she moved toward the operational console, her arm brushed his, brief, deliberate, unremarkable in the way that only deeply familiar things are. And the pale blue light caught the command insignia on her sleeve, the same colors as the braid he'd accepted in a room full of witnesses 6 months ago. He hadn't retreated then. He wasn't retreating now.